What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Islam Makhachev fires back at Michael Chandler. Ahead of Islam Makhachev's highly anticipated showdown with Charles Oliveira at UFC 280, predictions have been flying in regards to who will leave Abu Dhabi with the belt. With just about a month to go until the pair collide for the vacant lightweight title, former title challenger Michael Chandler has made it clear that he isn't very sold on Makhachev's #1 contender status.
Nothing against Islam, like you said. You say he's great. You say he looks, he looks unbeatable at times, but dadgum, he hasn't really fought anybody. That's really the truth. He beat number 14, and then he beat Dan Hooker, who was on a 3 or 4 fight losing streak.
Unsurprisingly, the comments didn't sit too well with Team Makhachev. Dominance MMA manager Ali Abdelaziz was quick to fire back in a tweet, calling out Iron Mike for speaking out of turn while just being 2-2 inside the octagon. Now, Makhachev himself has spoken out against the former Bellator MMA champion via Twitter for his comments. The way he sees it, Chandler has no room to be talking considering the fact that his only 2 wins in the UFC are over fighters coming off losses. While Makhachev is gearing up for his October showdown for the vacant title, Chandler is of course preparing for a New York clash with Dustin Poirier. The bout between the two is expected to determine the lightweight #1 contender, with the winner likely facing October's lightweight title fight winner. Although there has been no word from Chandler yet, the fan favorite has now been on the receiving end of 2 verbal shots from Team Makhachev this week. As promo for his bout with Poirier ramps up, expect Chandler to be asked about the situation sooner rather than later. Henry Cejudo confident McGregor is using PEDs. Former UFC champ Conor McGregor has made headlines this week as reports surfaced indicating that the Irish superstar is the only fighter on the UFC roster to have not been tested by USADA this year. As fans and fighters continue to criticize both the UFC and USADA, Henry Cejudo has now weighed in. He spoke in a recent video on his YouTube channel, saying,
"He's on that privilege list. That's crazy. That's thing. Those are things to bring up. But that's crazy. Yeah, but that roids are not gonna help Conor. Of course he's on that. Not knowing that, but it ain't gonna help him. The dude needs to stay away from coke, dude. That's what he needs to do."
With McGregor in the midst of preparations for his return to the octagon next year, the former champion has been traveling on his Lamborghini super yacht. Given that, it's not entirely surprising that USADA hasn't tested him so far this year. With that being said, however, the agency has been diligent in handing out whereabouts violations when fighters don't notify them of their location. For their part, USADA has doubled down on their claims that fighters are subjected to random testing, and they must notify USADA of their whereabouts. In the statement released on the matter, the agency stated that they don't comment on the testing of specific fighters. Fighters in the past have claimed that they've received whereabouts violations for going out of town for as little as 24 hours without providing an update. Considering the fact that McGregor has continued to travel for months without being tested, fans are beginning to suspect that he either is not giving details on his whereabouts or the UFC is engaged in some shady backroom deal to prevent him from being tested. With Cejudo recently entering back into the USADA testing pool this year, the former champ is preparing to make his return to the octagon as well. While there has been no word yet as to when Triple C will return to the octagon, he's notoriously had to be a part of the USADA testing pool for 6 months before being considered an active fighter again. Next up, backstage footage of Nate Diaz and Dana White after UFC 279. In the main event of UFC 279, Stockton superstar Nate Diaz put on one final display inside the octagon as he submitted Tony Ferguson in the 4th round. While the fight was a closely contested one through the first 3 rounds, an ill-advised takedown from Ferguson's corner spelled the end of the fight. As Diaz spoke to Joe Rogan for the final time inside the octagon, many expected him to announce his retirement. Despite that, Diaz went on to announce his intentions to compete in other combat sports before then shocking fans by revealing that he wants to return to the UFC again in the future. To the surprise of many, Diaz also used his post-fight octagon interview to thank UFC President Dana White and the UFC to end things on a positive note. Since then, footage has emerged of Dana White and Nate Diaz backstage in the immediate wake of the win, where White can be heard saying,
"Well, congrats. Good luck with everything, man. And this is always your house. If you need anything,
yes, sir. Thank you.
Whatever you need, it's your house, kid."
Well, let's hang out.
Likewise. And
Diaz and White have notoriously had a rocky relationship over the years as things have ebbed and flowed. At their best, the pair were somewhat of friends as they traveled around to promote a rematch between Diaz and Conor McGregor. At their worst, the pair nearly came to blows following a season of The Ultimate Fighter that saw Diaz's Scrap Pack teammate Gilbert Melendez coach against Anthony Pettis. Following the filming of the season, the cast members and coaching team celebrated at a bar where White and Diaz nearly came to blows over Diaz's contract. Fortunately, considering things are ending on good terms between the two, the door is now open for Diaz to make an eventual return to the octagon. And before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Aspen lad released after missing weight once again. The Aspen lad era is no more. After a brief period that saw the former Invicta FC fighter find success inside the UFC, the hype surrounding the California native quickly died down. Recently, Lad's fight with Sarah McMahon was cancelled at the 11th hour after Lad withdrew from the scheduled bout. The withdrawal was the second time she withdrew from the scheduled bout with McMahon, prompting the UFC to cut her from the roster. In addition, UFC roster watch is reporting that Lad's scheduled opponent Sarah McMahon has also been released from the UFC after being left without an opponent. The release marks the end of a rough stretch for Lad, who has dealt with weight problems since 2016, just a year into her MMA career. After missing weight while under the Invicta banner, Lad then missed weight again 2 years later, prompting her scheduled bout with Leslie Smith to be cancelled. Lad most recently missed weight last year ahead of her scheduled bout with Macy Chiasson, prompting the UFC to subsequently cancel the bout. With weight misses across multiple divisions, Lad will likely have to prove she's capable of winning and making weight in another promotion before having another shot in the UFC. On the flip side, Sarah McMahon's release comes after a decision win earlier this year against Carol Rosa. For the UFC veteran, the release could very well signal the end of her MMA career, given the fact that she's been unable to climb the rankings since falling short in her title bid in 2014. And now for our breaking news story of the day, we have the UFC being forced to cancel a fight because a fighter was injured. It was reported early that Edson Barboza is out of his UFC Vegas 63 fight with Ilia Topuria with a right knee injury. As of right now, the UFC is looking for a replacement. What do you guys think about the situation? Let us know down in the comment section below. Last up, Mackenzie Dern names Charles Oliveira best grappler in the UFC. With the record for most submission wins in UFC history, Charles Oliveira's name has begun to be mentioned in the same breath as the greatest grapplers in the history of the sport. From his beginnings as a pure grappler at featherweight to the lightweight kingpin who masterfully blends striking with grappling, Oliveira's evolution has been a sensational one. For those like Mackenzie Dern, who come from a background of grappling, there's something special about seeing Oliveira find success at the pinnacle of the sport. Ahead of her upcoming fight on October 1st at the UFC Apex, Dern spoke about Oliveira's evolution and his spectacular ground game in an appearance on The Fighter vs. The Writer, saying,
like I said, he's 10 years till he got to this point, but it's like now that he's there, he's the best in the world, and there's no doubt about it. So it's like just even his story, his journey that he did, it definitely is inspiring for me. Like, okay, be calm, take your time, each fight learn and it's experience, strategic wise, be smart. I see like sometimes Charlie, he kind of gets rocked a little bit and he pulls guard, that's something that like I'm learning to like, okay, play smart, you know what I mean? Okay, if I get rocked, don't like try and stay standing up and give it back, like, okay, you can pull guard, you know what I mean? Like kind of pull guard, like, okay, see if they come into your guard. And
ahead of Oliveira's upcoming clash with Islam Makhachev, many believe that the bout will determine the best grappler in the UFC, as well as the lightweight champion. The scrap will be an incredibly unique clash of styles, with Team Khabib protege Makhachev looking to prove that combat sambo reigns supreme over Brazilian jiu-jitsu. For Dern, as she stated in the interview, the fact that it has taken Oliveira so many years to reach his prime form serves as an inspiration for fighters like Dern who have gone through rough patches after making the transition to MMA. When she steps into the octagon on October 1st, the former Abu Dhabi 60-kilo champion will have to look to build on an April win over Tecia Torres that saw her return to the win column after having a 4-fight win streak snapped. Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.